And I would say that what we should be looking at is our regional integration agenda. Trade and regional integration have been extremely important in all the development strategies of countries on the African continent. I'm going to stick to what I think the key challenge for African development as far as participation in international trade is concerned, and that is the capacity to produce tradables competitively. And I would like to say that regional integration makes a lot of sense if we take a look at African countries that are characterized by small markets, small economies, small countries. In other words, for us to come together to enlarge our markets so we can reap the benefits of economies of scale, of learning, larger environment for foreign direct investment, for example, makes a lot of sense. The importance for me, and I think for Africa in terms of a services agenda, is that services are inputs into all business activities, from farming, agriculture, to manufacturing, and to other services sectors. But services also have an important development dimension. If we take a look at the quality of life, if we take a look at the quality of living in many of our African countries, they can be effectively enhanced by access to better quality and cheaper services.
In the area of security, in the area of priorities as set out by the AU, you will see that security is a concern. It's a concern for the continent, it's a concern for all of us. If you look down at this, you'll find that the heads of state in their wisdom have designated 2010 as the year of peace and security in Africa. The journey that we have taken from 63 as a continent the continent has gone through various phases. In the beginning, there was a fever called independence fever. Alongside that fever came along single state parties. But along there was another fever called democracy. I will be amiss, ladies and gentlemen, if I don't mention one particular area that is of great importance. We see today a convergence of two discourses. We see a convergence of the development discourse. We see a convergence of the security discourse. But the common objective is the issue of the time bomb. There's a time bomb that is ticking among our societies, and it's called poverty. Unless it is addressed, all the number of tents will be useless. So this is the convergence of the two discourses, I think.
Time and again, the role of civil society in Africa gets contaminated by various sectors of our society. That includes government, private sector, non-governmental organizations, and individuals with their hidden agendas in the society. We therefore need credible men and women to formalize and lead our civil society for Africa to thrive. To date, ladies and gentlemen, as Khayelitsha Development Forum, we estimate the people of Khayelitsha as 1,500,000 people. Khayelitsha is situated on a plain of about 15 square kilometers. You know, according to the planners, they are saying that if that is the situation, with the proper planning and of the human settlement, the population of Khayelitsha under normal circumstances is supposed to be at 250,000. Now you can imagine overcrowding that is actually taking place in that particular area. Khayelitsha, with the formal civil society structures like KDF, I can assure you, is tackling the problems head on and has resilience in terms of dealing with challenging situations.
Entrepreneurship is a wide field ranging from social entrepreneurs, political entrepreneurs who have now moved on to become tender entrepreneurs, as well as business entrepreneurs. If we accept the entrepreneurial process as something that you firstly identify a need, find the means and resources to meet that demand, and actually be the first person in that market to take that demand. In this new Africa, coupled with educated young people who have an international perspective, together with liberation leaders in one-party states, a clash will inevitably come about. For innovation to happen, certain things need to be loose. Governments need to be more friendlier to business. Trade unions need to be more accommodative of enterprise. These are all the little things that will make a young entrepreneur or an old getting into a market able to actually get into that market. Thank you very much. To start with the first question, in terms of how does an entrepreneur off the street able to understand the patent? Simple. We don't put patents on the platform. We put technology profiles of a certain technology, which stipulates this is the benefits, this is the target market, this is what you'll do with the thing. So anyone who is able to understand English would be able to read that and capture what they can do with the technology, then move on from there. We go through large pains to ensure that the technology profiles are in commercial language and not scientific language. To come with the thing is, with innovation, it is better to take innovation from another place and put it into your context and evolve it for your needs. But the problem with that is we are putting ourselves in the risk of saying Africa should never research. Africa should always imitate. And do we really want a future like that where we sit on our laurels and wait for the rest of the world to develop and we to catch up every time they've developed? So I don't think I'm answering your question, but that's my perspective on that.
Can I maybe just add that years ago, probably 20 years ago, appropriate technology was a major topic. You know, I've been teaching development economics for many years, and it was one of the key topics. I find nowadays amazingly little reference to this. And I would say, and with Professor Nkuslu, we discussed today the question of Africa needing an agricultural revival. And maybe there's a lot of appropriate technology needed for that, which isn't inferior, which isn't second class, and which isn't sort of one generation later imitating what the Whiteys sort of did a generation ago. No, it's now adapting it, you see. And I wonder again, as a challenge to us as a university, are we doing enough?
We talk about the services sectors. We're of course dealing with a whole range of activities. And I think one of the areas where better statistics would be very valuable is in terms of measuring services activity. And coming back to the question to my colleague as to economic activity in Khayelitsha, if one takes a look at the economic activity taking place, service provision, for example, my bet is that is heavily underestimated. If we take a look at investment, for example, we often take a look at the lack of foreign direct investment or cross-border investment taking place in our part of the world. But a hairdresser comes across from Botswana to operate in Khayelitsha. There's some investment, there's service provision, economic activity, value addition associated with that. So I think there's a lot of services activities which fall below the radar screen, which is very important. But I think the kind of services I've been talking about here are coming from sectors where our state involvement has been extremely important. You're dealing with sectors where the services, whether it be banking, whether it be telecommunications or transport, have been very much state-controlled. And processes of privatization or commercialization have in fact not gone to the final conclusion of actually bringing in competition. So if one takes a look at telecommunications provision, in most countries in our region, we still have effective monopolies in fixed-line telecommunication services provision. a lot of activity in, for example, cellular provision, and we're seeing there the penetration in terms of cellular reach is enormous, enormously significant. And that's contributing in many, many ways to more effective agricultural trade, for example, access to markets. We hear about Kenyans, for example, phoning up to hear what the price is on the market before they harvest their crops. So communications can be, in a very diverse way, very effective in a whole range of different other economic sectors. Do we have the funding? I think if one takes a look at a diverse range of services sectors, then very often the investment ranges from very, very serious investments that need to be made, for example, in fixed line telecommunications, but also very small investments that may be made in other forms of telecommunications infrastructure. We find the same in the financial services sector, and I think this discussion about capital, about financial markets is really, really important. And what we see in the informal sector, the stokvels and other arrangements, and if we compare experience, for example, in India with the Grameen Bank, then very often you do find informal responses to those market deficits, which do not require a great deal of capital to get going, but they reach a threshold level beyond which it's difficult to develop. And this is really a kind of cap on entrepreneurship that we see not only in financial services markets, but in other kinds of economic activity as well. And my guess is, as far as technology transfer is as well, and that's where we need the big investment. And I think your reference to China is a particularly important one here. We're seeing China looking at the African continent as a supply of very important resources, coal, you name it, all the minerals, because they need them for their manufacturing activities. And what China is doing is engaging directly with government to build infrastructure, for example, infrastructure to assure access to those resources. So it's a Chinese development agenda that is becoming part of a broader infrastructure development agenda in Africa and many, many countries in Africa. And this is where our countries, our governments need to wake up. What is our development agenda? What are our priorities? Instead of being reactive to outsiders who are bringing foreign direct investment, which arguably we do need. It's very, very important. But what are the terms and conditions on which we accept that? And there lies a governance issue. And I think a very important challenge for every African country. Very often we paint ourselves into a corner in terms of long-term supply contracts on factors such as electricity and water, which in my view are two of the major constraints on sustainable development in Africa, because we need that foreign direct investment. Don't be blind to what the investors tell us. They need us. They need our resources. And we have that leverage which we're not effectively using as governments. And I really would like, if a strong message can come through to our governments, for them to wake up, to think in terms of the development of domestic policy, of regional policies, where we don't compete with one another, so that an investor shops around, as we've seen in our part of the world. A Malaysian textile company going from the Eastern Cape, securing contracts, then taking those commitments and trading them off in our neighboring Namibia. And the history of that investment is a very, very sad story. All the promises of 10,000 jobs being created and so on came to naught because we were captive to the demands of those investors' promises. So let's wake up and let the private sector assist government to develop a domestic policy and regulatory agenda so that we know what we're bargaining for when we talk to those investors.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is far too good a response for me to add anything further onto it. So, can I use the opportunity to thank Trudi and thank the panel and thank you? We've just touched it, you see, but in terms of the timetable, we actually exceeded that one. So thank you very much, and over to you, Mariki.